Because you've always taken such charge.
You are listening
to the Border Chronicle.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Border Chronicle podcast. I'm Melissa Del Bosque, co-founder of the Border Chronicle, along with Todd Miller, providing you with independent news, culture, and context from the U.S. Mexico border. Today, I'm joined by geographer Dugan Meyer. We're both in Tucson, but in our separate kingdoms. I'm in the far east of Tucson, and you're somewhere in Midtown, or where are you, Dugan?
Pretty central.
Okay, central Tucson, live from central Tucson. And we're here to talk about this very cool project called Wall Watch, which the Border Chronicle launched last week. And you can check it out at theborderchronicle.com. And Dugan is very much, I would say, like a very crucial part of Wall Watch. He built a lot of it. And we've been working on it for some months. And it's a community-powered mapping project of border wall construction, surveillance, technology, and other data. And it's a border-wide map. And it's a collaboration between Southern Arizona and South Texas. We built a web-based app and an interactive border-wide map. And what makes it really special is that any border resident can submit a community report on border wall construction, surveying, vegetation clearance, buoy barrier installation, and it's going to pop up on the map, with the geolocation and the photographs and a description of what the person is seeing. And it's an opportunity for border communities to report on the ground to the rest of the world what is going on and what they're seeing, rather than Washington, D.C. making stuff up about what's happening at the border, which is usually the case. And I would say, I'm aging myself, but in my 20 plus years of reporting on the border, I think the most common thing I hear from border residents is that what's being discussed nationally, politically in the news does not reflect what they're seeing on the ground. It doesn't reflect their lived reality. So the Wall Watch project is an opportunity for border residents to project what actually is happening for the rest of the country to see. And that's really what we hope will come from it. We've already got quite a few reports on there, but, we're hoping for other parts of the border like California and New Mexico, and Southern Arizona too. Actually, we need more folks from Southern Arizona to make some reports. And we hope that, this will be of great use to journalists, border residents, lawmakers, researchers, environmentalists, anybody who is tracking what's happening on the ground at the border, especially right now when there's $46 billion being spent between now and 2029 on just a massive construction mega project. I mean, they're dynamiting mountains, they're flattening, vegetation. They're doing all kinds of things right now. And so I'm really happy that Dugan's here, because Dugan has built all of the data in the map, and he's going to talk about how he did that and what's available to the public, because this is all available for people to download if they want it. And Dugan is going to be the administrator for Wall Watch for the next year. So he's the person who checks the community reports before they're submitted onto the map. But first of all, Dugan, I want you to kind of give us your bio, because it's very interesting, and I want you to talk about what your interests are and your background.
Sure. Well, I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy that you reached out to me to start this project. My background is as a researcher. Basically, I'm a geographer. I've been studying police power broadly and border security, border policing more specifically, for years now. Over the last 3 years, a little over 3 years, I focused a lot on mapping and documenting. I'm also a photographer. Security infrastructure, so everything from surveillance towers to mobile towers to forward operating bases that the Border Patrol has, to license plate readers, many of which are called covert, CBP, Customs and Border, and DEA has an entire network of license plate readers around this region. So I've traveled the length of the border in numerous different trips in the past few years, trying to document this infrastructure, much of which had not been mapped otherwise. So I have been collaborating pretty closely with the Electronic Frontier Foundation in particular, which has a really wonderful map of surveillance infrastructure along the border that they launched about 3 years ago. And so I work with them, when I travel around and find infrastructure, I send that information to the EFF. And so that's a web-based map as well. That is actually, I should say, is part of what inspired me to think more directly about how to map and how to document and how to build databases like this. So I've been building databases within these topics. So in the last year or so, I've also worked a lot in Tucson with community defense groups, trying to map ICE operations, I should say ICE, et cetera, because it's often multi-agency operations. So I developed a license plate database to try to document the insane number of unmarked police vehicles, which is something that ICE uses, Border Patrol uses, but every other police agency uses as well. And there really hasn't been a lot of attention to that. It's really hard to document that if you don't know what you're looking for. And so over time, and this is kind of in collaboration with a broad group of citizen mappers, I shouldn't say citizen mappers, community mappers here in Tucson that have been documenting these vehicles. So building up a database of that really, I think, brings into focus, an under-recognized dimension of policing. So we've mapped about 1,000 unmarked police vehicles of all different agencies just in the past year, more each day. I think yesterday there were a few that I've added. And so building on that, I also helped develop what's called a Meager map, Tucson Meager map. So this is a web-based interactive map as well that's drawn. It's a community mapping project similarly. So reports come in from a variety of sources. Probably the number one source is our rapid response network here, but people report incidents through social media and many different other avenues. And so we developed a collaborative project to verify those reports and to create a public map so that people can see in Tucson where these incidents are happening and learn a little bit about them, about what we know. So that was a huge project that also took months to kind of get off the ground. We're still kind of developing our team to keep that updated. But that was, for me, I think, the first time I had developed, I think, a community mapping project kind of at a similar scale here. And I'm a geographer. I am working on a PhD, and I surprisingly don't really have a background in mapping per se. Many people go into geography and study GIS, or GIS stands for Geographic Information System. So learning how to do mapping and using these methods as a kind of primary part of their work. My work has traditionally been so far using other methods, particularly other kind of qualitative methods, interviews, discourse analysis, things like that. And I sort of accidentally fell into mapping, essentially. It became a greater part of kind of what I do, especially as I kind of realized, the benefit for tools like this. I should also say that there are a lot of very accessible tools right now, and mapping is not as difficult as it might seem, I think, for people. So we can talk about these later in the podcast here, but some of the kind of tools that we're using for this are open source tools that people can learn, and you'd be surprised what you could do. And so I want to kind of emphasize that, because I think people don't understand that this is a method that they could develop themselves. You could create, your own meager map in another place. You could map something that you care about where you are, and you would be surprised at kind of what's available to you now, and really how easy it is to collaborate with others for something like this.
Yeah, I mean, this is something. I mean, watching what you all did with Tucson Meager Map and seeing, different community maps that are being built across the country, I find it really encouraging. I mean, obviously, we're in a very dark time politically. Authoritarianism is on the rise. At the same time, we're not able to access public data. These days, if I file a FOIA with the Department of Homeland Security or CBP, they're not going to respond. I'm not going to get that data. And so we're seeing these sort of grassroots projects where these maps are being built for information and, for protection of communities, which I find really cool and super encouraging. I also didn't know that geographers were so cool. So Caroline Tracy is also a geographer on our staff. So I just didn't realize that you geographers were so hip.
I know. This is a realization that a lot of us come to who didn't kind of grow up around geographers, that kind of, get turned on to the field and the wide variety of work that people do. And again, especially things like this, I think, this type of work is something I care about, is, collaborative work, community-based work, and work that can kind of generate or inspire maybe other people to do similar things. So again, like using these tools, one thing I think is really interesting about, mapping is mapping is a method for representing these things, right? So they exist out in the world. These types, these knowledges essentially exist out in the world. Like if we take Tucson Meager Map, for example, in Tucson, right, we have an entire city, a network of people who are documenting and experiencing this basically like counterinsurgent hunting expedition by federal agents. And so the knowledge exists there. Mapping is a tool for representing that and for kind of connecting people to understand what's happening around them and to be able to contribute as well. And that, I think, is something that's really exciting about mapping projects like this. And also, I think, kind of more broadly about geography, because geography really, what's cool about it is that it is a discipline that cares a lot about relationality between people. And, that's what kind of makes the world around us. And so our tools for representing that really can kind of foreground that relationality.
Yeah. I mean, it's reporting what's happening around you for the protection of the community around you. And so with Wall Watch, taking a page from all these really cool maps that have been being created around, like Tucson Meager Watch or ICE, and applying it to border wall construction, because, in the long, I've been writing about the border wall construction for almost, more than 20 years. And this is the worst I've ever seen it in terms of the government communicating with people on the ground. Back in the day, there used to be like a community liaison between CBP, Customs and Border Protection, which is the federal agency under DHS that oversees the construction. They used to have a community liaison that would talk to the community. They used to have meetings, where they would take input from the community. It wasn't great back then, but it was something. Border Patrol would go door to door, try to get people to sign the eminent domain paperwork. But now there's none of that. It's a handful of private contractors with multi-billion-dollar contracts that are just kind of running amok with very little oversight from the government to no oversight. And then the government telling us that one thing is happening when something entirely different is happening on the ground. And you're especially seeing this in Big Bend right now, Big Bend National Park, iconic park in Texas, beautiful, beautiful place, very, very rugged. Border crossings there are less than 2%. I mean, nobody crosses there. There's no need for barriers and, cutting new patrol roads and all of that. And CBP has repeatedly said that they're not building barriers. They're just, everything they're doing is very minimal. At the same time, they've got like an army of bulldozers just like bulldozing everything down. And so people on the ground are like, hey, wait a minute, this is very different from what you're telling us, what's going on. So, right now there's a pause on it, on construction there. But I don't think anybody in the border communities feels like they can really trust what the government says, because the government just says whatever, and then the private contractors do whatever they want. So I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about the different layers of data that we have on the map that people can access and use, and how are the community reports going so far?
Great. So layers of information are what are represented on the map. So they're kind of categories of different information that we have here. And we built the map so that a viewer can turn these layers on and off to see them represented on the map. We have a few different types, a few different categories of data here. So we have two layers that relate to the border wall itself, or border barriers. So the first is current barrier projects, and the second is existing border barrier. Current barrier projects is probably the one that most people are going to look for right away. We are taking this data directly from U.S. Customs and Border Protection, their online smart wall map, they call it. However, we are adding a lot to this data because we're gonna talk about this a lot, I'm sure, today. But what you mentioned about the difficulty in obtaining data, the lack of transparency from this administration and these agencies is a really big part of the story. And I think that anyone, whether you're a journalist or a researcher or just someone, member of the public that is trying to find information about these public works, essentially, you have probably realized that it's surprisingly hard to get this information. So this was something that even before we started working on this project had bothered me a lot, right? Especially someone studying different infrastructure or border wall, trying to even research where these different projects are happening. The funding that's happening is one thing. Even that is not fully reported. But to really find what is planned and where exactly, if you read a lot of what the reporting is out there, especially reporting that is taking the scant information that is available from the government, the maps that they might show are really hard to actually use on the ground. If you were to really want to go and see where exactly are these things happening, it's really hard to do that because a lot of the maps, when they are made available by CBP, they might be in environmental assessment reports or similar reports. They are usually just a static map image that is not zoomed in. It's very generalized, right? And so we do have a available map, a publicly available map from CBP for the border barrier system as it is. Their layer, again, of current barrier projects breaks it down by the different project types, the different project names, the different individual projects. But we're adding a lot of data as well, more information to this layer because a lot of information that would be really valuable to people is missing, even from what's available there. For example, we are trying to add the associated contracts, the amounts for each section, the contractors that have gotten these contracts. We are trying to also add the different laws that have been authorized. They've been authorized to ignore certain laws, environmental laws, for instance, to build these things. So these are different types of information that people care about, right? Like members of the public, other researchers, journalists. And it's hard because you're chasing this type of information from a variety of different sources. And when we started this project, there was no comprehensive source, a database or a map like this that showed all of this information in one place. So we're trying to build that. The existing border barrier layer right now, we've also taken that from U.S. Customs and Border Protection, their map. And on that map, that layer has almost no information. It is purely a layer of a single geographic line that shows where the existing border barrier exists, but it is not broken up into different barrier types. It doesn't say anything about when these different sections were built, the types of barriers, anything else, right? And so this is a layer that right now we have on the map as it is from CBP, but over the next few months, we're working to build this layer out into a more comprehensive, segmented layer, which I think I would be very excited about because, this is something that I think, there is no single comprehensive source to look historically at wall construction over time, right? And so what we hope to do with this is not just to provide a resource that people can use for what's happening right now, which is very important, but also to see the existing barrier and that change over time as well. So we're going to be adding more to that. We have a few different layers that show other types of infrastructure. So things like the ports of entry, the checkpoints that CBP, Border Patrol operate on roadways throughout this region. We have Border Patrol stations. We're going to be adding very soon a layer that will break down the different sectors. So there are a variety of different Border Patrol sectors that divide up the region. That map is not easy to find. That is not published by CBP as well. So things like this we're trying to just make available to use. We also have a layer of surveillance technology, and we pull this from the EFF's map. So the Electronic Frontier map that I mentioned before, which is an amazing resource. That is available. They make their data available to anyone as well. So what our map does is kind of just automatically pulls that in. And so we put it on this map so that folks can see that, in relation to these other types of data. And that would include surveillance towers, automatic license plate readers, both the ones that are visibly positioned at Border Patrol checkpoints, but also a variety of covert license plate readers around this region. I've focused on this in my own work closely for a few years now. I've photographed dozens of these. They are basically hidden, often in traffic barrels, or what are called impact attenuators, right? The yellow and yellow stripe barrels. So on roadways throughout this region, a network of these exists as well. I've been mapping those with the EFF and others, so that data is on there. They also have one more layer, I think, of facial recognition technology at ports of entry. Okay, so we have those. Those are layers. Now, the community reports layer section. These are multiple layers that I think we're really excited about. This is something that's really special about this map. Again, is that folks can visit the map and submit reports for a variety of different things. So, for example, right now we have reports of new construction. So if people see construction beginning, as you mentioned before, people might know in their area that there is border wall construction project on the books. It's often unclear when that has begun or not. And sometimes it might even be inaccurate, as it is in Big Bend with some of the information coming out from DHS about what's happening or what's not happening. So from the ground, this is again, we're sort of ground truthing this. There are people throughout this region who are out there and viewing, observing themselves, what's happening around them, and they could submit those reports to the map here, and then again, that will make that information more available to others more broadly, so we can really see what's happening. So Other types of data in this category would be environmental impacts. So I know we've gotten a few reports about some of the buoy barriers that have, because of flooding or other things, maybe become uprooted, dislodged, tangled, debris gets caught in them. That is an environmental impact. And vegetation clearance is another type of report that people can report on. That is something that often precedes construction activity, as does surveying, things like that. Also staging areas. So these would be areas in which construction equipment is kind of gathered. Maybe construction contractors might live on these staging areas, but they're often semi-permanent. We have some that have been staging areas for wall construction or wall repair for years now that we're beginning to map. Again, that is not something that, as far as I know, is mapped anywhere else. We have, people can submit other types of reports as well. And essentially, let me see, am I missing any layers here? I want to make sure I mention all the ones we have.
I want to add really quickly, though, with regards to the surveillance layer, a lot of people will ask about flock, of course, because flock is getting a ton of publicity or attention right now. But that's not included in the surveillance because flock isn't really a thing at the border. It's more that's more in the interior of the country, right?
This is a very interesting point, actually. And it's, I think, debatable whether, we consider that part of the system or not. I personally do think it is part of the surveillance system. Customs and Border Protection and the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, have for years basically had a cooperative program to put up license plate readers. So these are not flock. As far as I know, none of them are flock. Other companies produce some of these, like Leonardo is one, and others. And you can see, I think that information is available in the EFF's map. However, there are many companies that produce this type of technology, and some listeners might be familiar with DFlock, which is another community mapping project nationwide that also has an amazing map. Yes.
Super cool.
Yeah, and has, I think, more than 100,000, maybe 200,000. I forget what they're up to now across the U.S. An astounding number, really. And this is a map that everyone also can contribute to. So I'm one of the contributors in Tucson in finding these different license plate readers, and that you can submit those through an online community mapping platform called OpenStreetMaps, and then it displays on their map in a really useful way, so you can see these in your town. But these license plate readers would be added by other departments. So they could be public or private. So very famously, Home Depot and Lowe's in many places have flocks in their parking lots, but also police departments. So I'm a graduate student at the University of Arizona. The University of Arizona has more than 50 flock cameras on campus. It's very dense around. Also, Tucson Police does not actually have a contract with flock. And I'm talking at length about this because I think it is something that also I hope people understand is that even the license plate readers on the DFlock map, many of them are not made by Flock per se. So Flock is also just one of the companies that police departments are using. So in Tucson, the Tucson Police Department is, as we speak, putting up a dense network of license plate readers throughout town, most of which are made by a company called Verkada. This is a company that I think people should look up as well. You might be surprised to know that Verkada surveillance cameras are also widely used in school districts. So in Arizona, I think I read a statistic that more than half of public school students in the state go to a school that has Verkada surveillance cameras. They're AI equipped cameras.
How do you spell that if people want to look it up? Verkada.
Verkada.
Okay.
Yeah. So Verkada's company in Tucson Police also uses Axon and Motorola. So and perhaps some others, but the big three. So anyway, all across the country now, I think more and more people are being turned on, especially to Flock. the dangers of flock, and that flock cameras and other APR cameras are often used not just by local police, but are often accessed by border security agencies like ICE and Border Patrol. So it's a real thing that does happen. People should care about it. You should think about it in the schools and in public. It's a big deal. So yeah, that map is a very important thing, and people see that, but it's not represented on our map.
Yeah, and with going back to the community reports, people can report surveillance on the community reports, which will be added to the border-wide map.
Yeah, I hope people do. Again, anything people report will see. What we do with surveillance reports is we're just going to send them to the EFF, those reports. So if you report them to us, they will, if they're verified in some way, they'll be represented on the EFF's map, and then they'll be represented on our map automatically from that. But that's the plan for those type of reports.
Yeah, that is really, really great. So just to condense it then, so, with the smart wall map that the government has up right now, I mean, they took it down for a little bit, right?
Inexplicably, it was just missing from. This is part and parcel of again, what you mentioned before. This type of thing, there are websites for ICE and CBP that aren't updated, that have no information on them. It's wild. You could look for documents that may not exist or may not be downloadable. So it was slightly surprising to see that map with no information was just missing for a few weeks and then suddenly reappeared as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. And to quiz you now, how many miles of wall has been built and how many miles is left to be constructed?
I don't know. I'd have to look that up. I will say an interesting thing about that, though, is, one of the types of information that we've had to add to the data we've gotten from CBP. So when we sort of accessed that data and started to kind of clean that data and develop different categories for use on our map, one thing I realized is that the data about the length of sections was wrong in a very funny way for anyone making maps. So, using mapping software, you can automatically calculate the length of a section like that. So that was not done with CBP's map. I don't know where the length of miles came from for a lot of these segments, but some of them were flagrantly wrong, off by multiple miles. And in fact, there was an update to the CBP Smart Wall map, I think a couple of weeks ago, and part of that update, one of the only things that was updated was actually the mileage length for a number of sections, some of which were almost off by 100%. So again, that I think speaks to sort of the sloppiness, if we want to call it that. I mean, it might be intentional sloppiness in terms of the data that is displayed, even on a map like that. Again, to me, that is a very surprising thing. I think it might be surprising to other people as well, especially those who haven't encountered it before.
It's crazy. So this is okay. So this is my biggest concern, and this is what I think may be happening. And this is one of the primary reasons why we wanted to do Wall Watch is, and your findings show this. I don't think the government really knows how many miles exactly. I think they've lost oversight of the construction. Yeah. I don't think they know how many miles they've actually built. And with Congress with the Republicans not holding this administration accountable at all. I mean, they've basically just handed it over to the private contractors and said, here's a gazillion $1 million, go build. I mean, they do give 36 miles or whatever.
Yeah. But that means almost nothing if you don't know where that 36 miles is.
And who's overseeing it from the government? Who's making sure that these contractors do what they said they're going to do and do it in a way that doesn't just waste taxpayer money and doesn't just build a thing that's just going to fall right over. I mean, we're already getting community reports showing, pieces of the wall that are being built that are already falling apart.
Yeah.
And they've just been built. And they're being built with old bollards that have been sitting there for 5 years, 6 years already, where they've just sanded the rust off of the bollards, the fence posts, and propped them up. So I think the government has lost the plot.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned before Big Bend, right? This is famously, for people who are familiar with that area, it would not be surprising to hear that very few people cross in that area, right? Illicitly. It's a very large, very rough area of the landscape that's very hard to move through. I think this is, no one's disagree. Even Border Patrol agents don't disagree with that, right? That very few things are crossing there. So why build a wall at all there, right? I mean, I think that what you're kind of pointing out is something that I think is true for a lot of the security infrastructure that we're talking about, not just border barrier, but the surveillance technologies and everything down to, the roads that are built and things like that, right? I mean, one angle to kind of, approach this from in asking would be asking like, are all these forms of infrastructure really, about preventing migration at all, even, right? Or could it be that one of the reasons for building this is to generate profit, right? Or to, send money into these companies, right? I think that, again, I mean, that is at least to me as equally plausible as an approach that says this is to prevent this problem that we're talking about. I think it really serves to generate its own activity over and over. And so I also think like we'll see just, when they theoretically complete this barrier system, we're going to hear about the northern barrier with Canada, and we're going to just continue to hear about upgrades to this barrier as well, because this industry, the security industry and the construction industry is not going to go away, and they will need more things to build. And it's just going to keep going if we don't stop it.
Yeah, it's the contractor stimulus bill, or it's the campaign donor stimulus
there you go.
Mega project. Because we're talking, this is bigger than the Panama Canal. This is bigger than the Hoover Dam. This is maybe comparable to the interstate highway system. I mean, we're talking almost 2,000 miles long.
Yeah. And
what people don't realize is it's a border wall system, as you were saying. It's not one border wall. It's two border walls with 150-foot enforcement road in between the two walls. It's stadium lights, it's surveillance towers. I mean, all you have to do is go to San Diego and you'll see what a border wall system looks like. They already have it. They have the two walls, they have the towers. It looks like a prison, and then they drape a bunch of concertina wire all over it. And, in 2023, when people were coming to ask for asylum, they used it as an open air detention site. Yeah. That's what they used it for. So the border wall system doesn't prevent people from coming. What it is a place to keep people. So they kept everybody contained between those two walls. And for us to have like basically an open air detention site for almost 2,000 miles, like that's going to be our southern border is just going to be, it's going to look like a federal prison is what it's going to look like. Yeah. And then in Texas, where the Rio Grande is the international boundary, we have the buoy barriers, which is like probably the dumbest border security idea ever. And that's really saying something. It is more than 500 miles of buoy barrier, each buoy being weighing a ton. Yeah. And these things are used on the open sea, and like the Suez Canal and stuff. They're not made for a river, especially a river that's going dry because of overuse and drought. The Rio Grande is one of the most endangered rivers in the world. It's already in trouble. And now it's got this massive it looks like the world's largest swim lane, and no environmental impacts, no community impacts have been done. And then we just saw this debacle a couple of weeks ago when they had a flood in Eagle Pass in Laredo area. And all the buoys that were staged on the side of the river, which the residents told the contractors, this is too close to the river. It's going to flood. When it does flood, all your stuff's going to go into the river. But the contractors were like, oh, we don't need to talk to the community. We don't need to listen to them. And sure enough, here comes the rain. It floods, not even a major flood. All those buoys get swept into the river, wrap themselves around the pillars of the World Trade Bridge in Laredo, shut down international trade, losing hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's like barely a blip in the news because, I mean, we're in the poly-crisis era now with this presidency. There's so much crap going on, but it is such a scandal.
Yeah.
Such a waste. Such a scandal.
What you're talking about too is, I mean, even in these sort of exceptional instances, it's debatable whether we even call flooding exceptional. Rivers flood, it's a normal thing.
It's normal.
Right. But
yes.
In situations like that, I mean, that it creates a problem for all sorts of users of the river as well. And I think one thing that, that is highlighted on this map is true for all of this infrastructure. It's also, we're talking about land, access to land for all different sorts of people is being changed and limited through this. So the infrastructure you're talking about, it is not just meant to, prevent potential migrants from moving through the region, or it's also it functionally prevents residents of this region from moving about in their landscape. So we hear from people along the Rio Grande, especially that people who have fished there for generations no longer have access to the river at certain points. In Arizona, where a lot of the land is public land, land is being closed off. I should mention that another of the layers that we're working on, which should be ready soon, is a layer showing the national defense areas. So these are another kind of delivery from the Trump administration, swaths of land in all four southwestern border states that is being closed to access to the public, and is essentially being designated as part of military bases, different military bases. So, a strip of land along, I think, New Mexico, a lot of that land, not the Boot Heel, but, from El Paso west and into the Boot Heel, a lot of that land that, for years, you or I could walk through up to the border wall that's there. All that is being closed off in order to be able to arrest anyone in that land for a federal trespassing charge, because essentially you would be trespassing on a military base. So I think it's just an aspect of the story to mention here is just like the change to land use, the change to land access that so many of us, I mean, I'm not from this region, but I love it here. As soon as I came here, I love it. I love the public lands and the richness, the diversity of the landscapes, the people, the communities, and all of that is being diminished, right? This this infrastructure, one kind of outcome of it that is not talked about in selling that infrastructure to all of us is that we all have less access to this landscape once this infrastructure is built.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, what happens when you turn the southern border into a federal prison?
Yeah.
If we just have a strip all the way down through border communities and through national parks that is double walls with razor wire, surveillance towers, and stadium lights, we're going to look like the United States of Geo Corporation,
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at our side of the border from Mexico, it already looks like we lost our damn mind,
Yeah.
and you have to go to Mexico now to be able to even access the border, because you can't access it from the U.S. side anymore. And, talking about the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas, I mean, I've been a reporter, been reporting there since, 1999, pre 9/11. And these days when I go, it's just incredibly sad to me, because I talk to younger people and they've never been to the river.
Yeah.
And the river's literally like 2 miles away from their house. And they just can't, they can't access it. And they're afraid of it because of the rhetoric. And there's nowhere for them to like commune with, nature and the river. It's completely blocked off. And, when I first started reporting on that area, the federal government had invested quite a lot of money in a federal wildlife refuge, a chain of refuges up and down the border there. And now that's all being put behind the wall. Unfortunately, it's just very sad. I mean, we really want to encourage border residents to submit a community report to the map, because we think it's a very powerful way to ground truth, as you said, Dugan, to show what's really happening on the ground, and to counter this false narrative from Washington about what is happening at the border, that, that they're, I mean, what was the Commissioner Scott saying about Big Bend, that they were there to protect it? And I'm like, protect it with bulldozers? Like they're just gaslighting us. So to be able to show on this map with photos, geolocation, descriptions, like, no, this is what's really happening. We're hoping that, lawmakers will look at this, journalists who are not at the border can look at this and, do stories about it. Environmentalists, researchers. And I mean, really, Dugan, you're doing yeoman's work in going through the government data and correcting it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not like the own government's data is not correct, which is really scary, because they're spending a gazillion billion of our taxpayer money, giving it to this handful of private contractors in no bid contracts with little oversight.
Yeah.
And what are these guys doing?
Yeah. I mean, it speaks to, I think, the way they see the public, and our kind of, relation to these projects. We're paying for them, and yet, we're not given.
We're inconsequential. Yeah.
So I would echo that.
Right.
I think, I really do hope that people will submit reports and share the map with others, so they can submit reports. It, like you said, it really allows more people to kind of, speak the truth about what's happening around them, and let other people know what's going on. And, I think that's as important now as it's ever been, honestly, right? I mean, it's not going to change, after this Trump administration. I mean, border security becomes a talking point for elections. It's a political kind of concept. And so, the rest of the country views this area through a very mediated way, right? Through television, and, if someone wants to learn more about the region, it can be very difficult to find out what's happening, especially when we're talking about border infrastructure. Even with the tools we have, I mean, there's accessible satellite imagery that people can access online, through not just Google, but other companies as well. We've never had a more kind of imaged, country, landscape, and yet a lot of this region here is not. We don't have a lot of that imagery, or it can be very hard to see. So I think people might be surprised that you can use Google Street View in your town somewhere, but there's still a lot of parts along the border in which Google Street View has never been, and so there really is no way from a distance to really see what's happening, so it really does depend on people who live and work and travel in these regions to kind of get these observations so that we can publicize them.
Yeah, and we're going to continuously keep, updating this map, and this map, as like Dugan said, is going to continue, beyond this administration, because really it's a bipartisan project to build this wall system. It's Democrats and Republicans that have funded it. I mean, obviously this administration has just gone completely off the rails, and in terms of the funding, it's just unprecedented. But yeah, we're going to continue with this project. So. So we'll wrap it up here, and I want to thank you, Dugan, so much for just joining us in this conversation and explaining how you built this wonderful thing, and also Matt Crocker of Rioplex Technology built the app in South Texas, which is amazing. Like I said, this was a border collaboration between Arizona and Texas to build this project. And so everybody, please, check out Wall Watch. It's at theborderchronicle.com. If you're a border resident, submit a report, usually surveying, staging site. That's the first sign that construction is going to happen, because they're not going to probably tell you. The government's not going to tell you. The contractor's not going to tell you. So it's a good way to let the community know, construction's on its way. I saw surveyors in my backyard, or they're staging a bunch of heavy equipment and bollards, near my town. I'll put a link to it also in the show notes, so you can check it out there.
And I should say too, on the site we have, a couple pages that can help folks. Like if you're curious about how to make a report, we have a page for that. And one other thing I wanted to put in there is, one of our pages is our methodology. So we tell, viewers where, we've gotten all this data from as well. So I want to give a shout out not just to Matt and others who've been collaborating with us on this, but others who have done, versions of a map of border wall in the past, some of which we've drawn on. And again, that we kind of lay out the sources that we've drawn on so far, and we will. But there are, existing, efforts at trying to map some of this system in previous years. None of them have continued, to now. But there are people that have tried to do this work. And then one last thing to say is we make our data available as well. So we have information on the site as well about using our data, so people can contact us. So, we can send you map files. You can map this yourself, or, we can talk to you about how to do something like this as well. So that is a big thing that was really important to us in the project is to kind of, taking an open source or like an open orientation to our data and our databases and making that available.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because this really is a collaborative effort, and we've relied so much on other folks who have put in a lot of hard work as well. And so we're just adding to that, to the work that so many people have already done, and making it public to people. Yeah. So, for transparency, for information, because people need to know. They need to know what's going on. Well, thank you so much, Dugan. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Border Chronicle podcast, and a big thanks to Dugan Meyer for joining me today about Wall Watch. And please check it out and submit a report if you are a border resident at theborderchronicle.com. This podcast is edited by Aaron O'Connor. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please consider rating us on your favorite podcast platform, and it will help others find our show. And check out more of our work at theborderchronicle.com. I'm Melissa Del Bosque, co-founder of the Border Chronicle. See you next time.
Because you've always taken such charge.
You are listening
to the Border Chronicle.